We're live. Hello, Daniel. How are you today? Where are you today? Tell us where you are today.
Yeah. I'm in Oakland, California, in the USA. Yeah, it's a sunny day. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, great to have you with us. Really good to have you with us. It's sunny here too in the UK. It's evening here. So we're crossing a whole set of time zones here in this conversation, which is one of the things I love about this platform. The capacity to connect across time and space is really great. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Stories of Creative Courage. And my guest today is Daniel Mandel, who I've known for a little while, and we'll probably say more about that as we have our conversation. But before we begin, I would love just to say a little bit about this conversation series, Stories of Creative Courage, and why I wanted to launch it and have it. And really, it's because I notice in myself and my own creative endeavors, and also with the other creatives I know and work with, that often what gets in the way is fear. And that actually to harness courage takes a great deal of effort and motivation. And that actually we're more powerful when we can be together collectively and share our stories and our experiences honestly and vulnerably, and that actually there's a lot of power in that collective togetherness and witnessing and support. So over the time that I've been running this conversation, I've talked to creatives of all kinds, and so here I am today with Daniel. So welcome, Daniel.
Yeah, yeah, very happy to be here.
Yeah, and so I want to say a few words really about who you are and introduce you just in very broad and general terms, because I'm sure that we will hear more about you as the conversation unfolds. But Daniel, you're a creative coach, which I love. I love that label, and I'd really love to unpack, coaching and creativity. And I know that you and I have had conversations before about what that looks like. But you're a creative coach. You are the host of your own podcast, Creative Engagement,
Yeah,
which is also on YouTube. And you're a singer-songwriter and a storyteller.
yeah.
So a multi-talented, I think they call it multi-passionate creative. Is there anything else you need to add into the mix there? Have we covered everything?
Yeah, I think that really does cover everything. In terms of like instruments, I'm new to piano and writing on piano. So mostly I've been a guitarist, but that's really the only other detail to throw in.
Oh, I love that. So you're still learning, you're still kind of embarking on beginning a new instrument. That's fantastic. Love that so
Absolutely.
much. Well, it's really good to have you here with us. And I can't remember exactly when we met, you and I. We've never actually met in person, have we? But we've had many conversations online and taken part in each other's kind of creative experiments over the years. So you hosted me on your podcast when I did my 3 words for the year experiment.
Yeah.
So this is a medium that we're used to, and it's really wonderful to have this conversation with you today. So let's dive in.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I just want to start in general terms, really, about just creativity and how that expresses in your life and work.
Yeah. So I love this topic, obviously. I'm approaching my 90th interview on my own podcast, interviewing people, all kinds of artists myself about creativity. And it struck me that as I was heading into this, that it's like, have you ever had that experience where you say a word and in a sense, the word starts to sound like foreign, like lamp. What does the word lamp even mean? Why does lamp represent that thing that glows? It's like that with creativity. Like I've said the word so many times, but
Mm.
it's represents such a rich field of possibilities. So I think of creativity as like almost a spirituality, a place of mystery and guidance that's that I can go to and really trust in and really kind of worship in a way and really love. And at the same time, creativity is challenging and it always brings me into a vulnerable place. So it seems so appropriate to be talking about creativity in the context of courage,
Mm,
because to constantly put yourself in a place where where I experience vulnerability is like I have to keep establishing, like checking in and refreshing, like, whoa, this can be a scary vulnerable place. It can be a beautifully vulnerable place. It can be a rich, emotional, vulnerable place, but that vulnerability is always a part of it. So sometimes I experience that as awkwardness. Sometimes I experience it as fear and something that I have to push through. And I come from like a long history of being up in my head and living up in my head and not being aware of or honoring where emotions sit in my body and
mm,
really allowing to feel them fully. But
mm.
through all my travels and I've kind of been a little bit of a workshop junkie. I keep getting these good lessons about, no, really feel your feelings fully in your body and take those feelings as important signals to use in your decision making in your life. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, to bring it back to creativity, um, it's there's so much richness to be found, and like, the word challenge comes up on over and over again. Like, I mentioned I'm learning piano. I'm writing songs on piano, whereas I've always only played guitar and written guitar, and it's so strange to write on a piano where all the notes are laid out in front of you, and music theory is more accessible in a way. So there's the also the challenge of learning something new brings me through this process of, it's frustrating when I don't have the same access to, uh, the familiar feeling in my fingers that I have on guitar. It's a new coordination, and so I have to then be kind to myself and be patient with myself as I'm learning to express through piano. So all these things are up in this field that we call creativity. And every time I come to it, it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, I have creativity figured out. It's in the bag. I get it. I know how it works. It's always a wonderful, rich exploration.
Yeah, thank you. Not rambling at all. I love all that. And I love that you bring the sacred into the conversation, you know, the spiritual aspect, the mystery. I love that you bring embodiment and the body to it because I think that's a piece that is often overlooked. You know, yeah, it's a realm of creativity that I think is hugely important. And like you say, it can be a kind of compass, the body, for where we need to go. It can help us through the mystery. I think that's how I see it. It's a way, it's a wayfinder, you know. Um, so that's beautiful. It sounds, Daniel, as though for you, and I want to come back to the piano bit later, but it sounds like for you, creativity is continually evolving. And I'd love to maybe chat a bit about what that's looked like over the course of your life, like how your creativity has evolved. Like if you can kind of summarize that in a very concise way, just the different stages of evolution that you've been through on your creative journey so far.
Well, yeah. So I think of, it's interesting because a lot of these answers, I also think of the interviews I've done and what's been reflected back to me. And w- to answer this, I would go to an interview where I was reminded that there's that point where we receive creativity.
Mm,
And, we're born, and my mom always sang songs to us as, you receive creativity, and then there's television and radio and books, and we receive other people's creativity. And then there's that inflection point where you get this glimmer of, oh, what would it be like if I told a story? What,
Mm,
like, do I get to write a song? Like, how thrilling would that be for me to write a song? But then would it be any good? And all those fears come up and you have to push through that. But so I think that's a very interesting inflection point. And for me, I remember very distinctly, I was reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and my imagination was just firing, and I was a young teenager, and I was listening to lots of songs that my older brothers and sisters played, and you know, a lot of Jackson Brown, a lot of ballads, um, all the kind of typical things on the radio. And I remember in the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of long epic poems with lots of stanzas, and in the style of the elves and the men and the dwarves. And it was just like, oh, I couldn't get enough of that. And I remember I heard a Harry Chapin song, and it was called The Rock. And it was this very long ballad about a story about a prophet who was warning the villagers that a big rock was going to fall on their village. And and I just remember, like, something sparked in me. Oh, like, I wonder if I could write a song. Like, I have all these examples that make me feel so passionate, and so I started writing songs, and I even remember, like, things like my mom would say, "Well, it's a shame you can't really carry a tune." And, so even, like, little bits of feedback, but I that didn't stop me, and that didn't stop me, and I
mm,
was so interested, and so that started me on a whole journey, and I don't know if this is typical, but my journey started out in very immature ways. So I started trying to write love songs and trying to understand unrequited love and why that person didn't love me back. And then I had to go through a whole process of realizing, wait a minute, some things that I I might be gay, and you're going through coming out, and then the whole exploration, and then how do you write love songs with coded signals so no one ever needs to know that you're gay, but you can say what you want to say. So a lot of rich territory, and so yeah, that then as I matured in my playing and songwriting, I started to really tried to tease out, but I kept writing love songs, and I remember I was on a retreat, and uh, Kath Burlinson, a teacher and friend, she said, "Oh, I like your love songs. I really, really like your love songs a lot. But have you ever tried writing a different subject, writing from a different person's point of view?" So she
mm,
challenged me, and that really opened up a whole world about, oh, what are the all the things that you could explore, and then what's off limits? What should you never write a song about?
mm,
So in recent years, I've challenged myself, like, how do I write a song that captures when someone died that I knew? And how do I write about my grief? Or how do I write about physical pain and what it means to move through and past physical pain? And anything that I feel like I can't write or it's not appropriate to write about, that becomes an interesting challenge. You know?
yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's a type of constraint, I think, isn't it? In a sense, it's like, oh, I need to step outside of my box, which is itself a constraint, actually. But then to write about something that may be challenging or to express yourself in a way that is vulnerable or, that you're not used to. that's the courage right there, I think. And it's interesting. My theme for this month on this platform on Substack, and with the kind of creative courage circle that I'm also leading as well, is perspective. And what I hear in what you said is like the need to shift perspective all the time in our creativity. Otherwise, we get locked into the same ways of expressing ourselves. Um, so yeah, I love how you express that that inflection point, going from receiving to expressing, and then this continual need, which I don't know about you, but I feel like it's a basic human need to express who we are, to put our thoughts and feelings out into the world.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I notice continually what happens when I don't, or I feel like I can't express. And then I do wonder about people who don't have a regular outlet. And I'm always encouraging people to like find any way to express yourself, because I think that's part of the beauty of highlighting courage with creativity, is that there's always reasons not to express ourselves, and there's always reasons to no, just stuff that down. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear about your grief from your friend dying. Stuff that down, and there's always reasons why y- you don't want to bother people with that. Or I have a in my personality, I have a strong, like, I don't want to upset anyone.
hmm
And lately, that's been highlighted back to me, where if that's really what's guiding me, then I'm not as much paying attention to those, like I was saying earlier, those feelings in my body. Instead, I'm
hmm
paying attention to what might upset someone and
yeah,
using that as my compass. And so then that creates a lot of false flags, and
mm
if I follow those, then I get myself in trouble and I get wound around the axle.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, I love that. Um, so welcome to those of us, those people coming to join us today. I'm talking to Daniel Mandel, and he's a singer-songwriter, amongst other things. And I love that because what I hear in that, Daniel, is a kind of greater attunement to self. Rather than kind of seeking the validation on the outside, or listening to those stories that come at us, through culture, through what we should be. And I think that we can touch on that later too. It's the kind of essence of who we are that is key, I think, to the joy of expression most of the time. That's my feeling anyway. So much to say, so many different directions we could go into.
Yes.
Um, we've touched a few times on this concept of courage, and where it sits with creativity, and its importance. I'd love to know for you, like, what gets in the way of your creativity? That's one thing. And then the other is like, is there a time where you've had to step up, really step up and be more visible or braver in your expression of your creativity? So there's a couple of questions there. There's a lot, but we can kind of, yeah, I'm happy for you to go wherever you want to go with those.
Yeah, I have a really direct yes response to that. So I this year, I launched a YouTube channel. And, I'm in my 4th year, like I was approaching my 90th interview in my podcast. And I feel like that has now become like a regular cadence in my life. And so I sort of have an appreciation for uh, how interviews go and how the editing goes and scheduling all that. And so that feels like it's happening on a regular basis. And I'm thrilled and grateful for that. But I have a friend who is an artist, and she challenged me and she said, "Well, Daniel, you're doing all these creative things. You're so constantly creative. I'm curious, why don't you have your own YouTube channel? Why aren't you putting out videos?" And I said to her, "Well, YouTube and this algorithm, and I can't compete with, the all the things and the algorithms against me. And I really wanted to just whine and complain. And she did not want to hear that. She didn't even let me finish. She didn't let me complain. She dismissed all that and she said, none of that really matters. The point is that you have such a unique way of expressing yourself. I just know if you did it on YouTube, it would be wonderful. And I s- was so frustrated with her dismissal of my whining that we kind of had a friendly way of wrapping up that conversation. But what I noticed, and what I'll do here at this point is bring in a separate idea. I've recently been exposed to internal family systems, where it's called IFS. And in the shorthand for that, you could call it like parts work, identifying parts of yourself and learning how those parts live and really kind of respecting that they have their own lives. So, because I'm relatively new to IFS and identifying my parts, I thought I has suspect that this whining, complaining, hating algorithm part of me, that's a part that I could learn something from in this situation. Because I've had the experience of just whining and complaining and letting that part whine and complain. But I thought, what would happen if I dug in and had a dialogue with that part? And first I had to say like how did that make you feel, Mr. Whiner, when you didn't get to give full voice to how much you hate algorithms? So I had this dialogue and then I had another thought, like, if you this is a common IFS question. If you didn't have the job of whining and complaining, what would you rather be doing? And so that gave me this idea that, well, if I played against type and I reframed the idea of YouTube videos, what would it feel like to have the joy of creating video after video and having a new way of expressing and telling stories, and anything that seems like a problem, like how well I speak in front of the camera extemporaneously, or what I don't know about lighting, or how to set up something behind me that looks decent, or, any of those skills that are related, those become then creative challenges. And I've learned from podcasting and songwriting and recording that creative challenges are that fun, wild, vulnerable, scary place that so enriches my life. So I could either be whining and complaining, or I could be having a rich set of experiences. Which way do I want to go? I'm going to embrace this YouTube thing and go for it. So that was a uh, real direct way that I noticed I was needed to be courageous within myself. And so it was really interesting to use this IFS idea of, hey, a part of me wants to complain and whine. And if I pay attention to that and honor that and have a dialogue, what might open up?
That is such a beautiful example of a stepping up into creative courage, I think. And also I mean, you've framed it very beautifully. And also you've given us, a tool or a set of tools that you use and that I also use. I'm so glad you mentioned parts work and IFS because I too, use those same tools on myself and with the people I work with. And I have found it to be incredibly powerful because when we notice those parts, we don't even know. We just whine or complain. We don't even know what's going on. We just do that. And yet, when we allow space to drop into, okay, which part is that? what is that part saying? And more importantly, like what purpose is that part serving? They're there to be honored because generally speaking, they've kept us safe. They've kept us feeling safe from what's perceived, the brain perceives as an incredibly risky strategy or risky, event of like stepping forward and doing something that the brain feels we're going to be, we're in danger, we're in mortal danger because we've still got brains that are wired for, evolutionary sort of past. Yeah, we've still got the brains that we had, centuries ago. So we could geek out on the neuroscience, but the point is having that awareness of the part and the role that that's playing, and then being able to. And I love that you use the word honor the part, honor the role that it's playing, and to allow it in gently and not to stuff it down, which is what you were saying earlier. And I think so many of us do that. I have definitely done that in the past. I've not known, so I've stuffed it down because it feels too scary. So to allow the space and have the courage to open even just a little bit and very gently invite in, a conversation with the part, or at least awareness of a part, can be revolutionary, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Mm,
and then I would further say that this whole arena of mistakes and my relationship with making a mistake or bumping up against something that I didn't know or a skill that I hadn't learned yet and the frustration of that, appreciating that and reframing that as here's an opportunity to learn and to have mistakes be out in front of people to see.
mm,
And so my first attempts at YouTube videos, I didn't really know how to be myself in front of the camera. In fact, I don't know that I know that even now, but I'm learning different ways to experiment with that and different ways to bring storytelling through video. And I so appreciate reframing how to work with mistakes and see them in a different way. And that's, I think, got to be part of the story of working with courage, right?
mm, yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that works for you. Like how, because for many of us, we'd say, I don't want people to see my mistakes. I'm not doing it. So what is that tipping point that's in what goes on for you in your head when you say, right, okay, well, the mistakes are actually welcome, or, you know, yeah, talk us through that process for you when it comes to
Yeah.
mistakes.
I think that part of my thinking has been if I reframe the anything that I'm doing as an experiment. So I have an idea. I want to. I maybe I have a way of uh, I'm gonna do this as a 5-minute lecture, and I'm gonna lecture in front of the camera and have some slides that I show. So I create that, and then in the process of making it, I make all kinds of mistakes, and I never realized that I would have to do the do it in like 30 shots before I
Mm,
got the shot that I wanted to, and I didn't realize how frustrating the lighting was gonna be, but then I finally get a product that I think, "Well, that says what I wanted to say, and I'm saying something important," and then I put it out, and then part of the experiment is the expression and that circuit of getting feedback, having it be online in front of people and available. And then I can see, oh, okay, 3 people watched that video.
mm,
So, and no one necessarily responded or commented or clicked or bought anything. So I could look at that and think, well, then that means that I failed. But I could also look at that and say, okay, I learned that way of presenting that idea didn't really resonate like I thought it was going to. And then I can say to myself, well, what would resonate? And so then that starts like a whole pattern of, well, what's the next experiment that gets me closer? And so that's a very interesting process, but it's also can be very frustrating.
Mm, yeah, it's so interesting that, isn't it? Because like we're used to these certain metrics of success, and things like viewing figures or likes or subscribers or whatever, all of those things are, metrics of success. When actually, again, another reframe is to say, well, hey, not only did I step up and do the thing and find the courage to do it, actually to treat it as an experiment and to constantly recalibrate, you know, is, I think, huge because it's a way of connecting with your audience. So by being open to, well, does this work or does that work? You're kind of listening to what people want and need, what's helpful as a resource, what's useful. And so this recalibration is a kind of conversation that you have. And so then there's this loop, I think, this feedback loop of you're creating and expressing, you're listening, and judging from the response. It's not like, oh, I haven't got any likes. It's like, okay, well, then I'll try something new and see where that goes. And so there's this continual kind of feedback loop. I think that's how I see it. Does that land for you in that description?
Oh yeah, and inside of that, there's a million little courageous acts, right? Like I'm doing this. I just turned 64 when I have gray receding hair, and so I have to then see myself as an older man doing this, and I have to see that my stomach is a little bigger than I'd like it to be. And so then there's all the little like, oh, how do I perceive myself? And I highlight that because I think that's such rich territory with creativity, and the mystery of creativity is that I get to experience myself and learn about myself, and sort of the challenge, can I love myself in the process? And any point where I see, oh, something is, there's this word in the YouTube sphere, people talk about cringy
Mm.
videos. And so if there's anything that makes me cringe about seeing myself, that's also like an inflection point of like, what am I not accepting or loving about myself? And the process, I think, of being vulnerable and being seen, learning to love myself is super, super valuable and rare. And I think that artists who do that and are courageous with their ability to love themselves, like openly in their sharing, that's really, really beautiful.
Mm, yeah. It's potentially very healing, I think, isn't it, for the artist or the creative to be able to embrace those parts of themselves or ourselves that we don't like so much. We don't like to see, whether it's external or internal. Um, but also, it's again deeply connected. There was something I came across recently or wrote about recently, which is, do we create from me? Do I create from me, or do I create through me? And this seems to me that's the distinction that you're drawing here, that something, you are the creator, but it's through you that you then connect with other people. So the from me part will kind of say, oh, that's not good enough, I don't look right, or the conditions aren't perfect. That's a kind of from me mode of expression, I think. Whereas through me, that doesn't matter. That's kind of irrelevant because really it's about the strength of the message and the presence that you
Yeah,
bring to the
that
process. Yeah.
yeah, that makes me think of that phrase. If can I get out of my own way to
Mm,
let whatever it's going to come through me? And sometimes when I get in my way, it's that, oh, people are going to see my wrinkles, or, oh, that, I'm starting this YouTube channel as an older man. So everyone wants to see a young person do this
Mm,
kind of stuff. And so anything that gets in my way, uh, again, I see it as like, or instead of like, am I not able to love myself? Am I free? Am I free? Do I feel free with my ability to express? Do I
mm,
feel free with my ability to have my body be my body? And any place
mm,
where I don't feel free, that's another part of this mystery, uh, of like, what can I unlock to be a degree more freer than I was? And
mm.
maybe I can do that in my next video.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, we can go on, you can go on ad infinitum, like forever, the next one and the next one and the next one. And it's just about that kind of stepping stone, creating just the next thing and orienting towards the joy of creation and the experimentation and play. And that's such a beautiful way to think about it, I think. Daniel, I think we're beginning to segue, I think, into another question that I'd love to ask you, and that we could talk about. So you're talking about freedom, you're talking about getting out of your own way, and I think what you're touching on there is what I would call, well, it's not that I have labeled this, but it's kind of generally, I think, in the sphere of spirituality and creativity too, perhaps this idea of essence that we bring, that we have an essence, and that when we can contact that essence and express from that essence, then we're much more liberated. We're much more, there's a kind of purer transmission, if you like, of who we are. So I'm curious to know what you think about essence and how that shows up. We've sort of touched on that a little bit, but I'd love to just unpack that concept a little bit more if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. That makes me think of things like, with these physical bodies, and as I get older and older, the idea of what the experience of death will be like. And when our essence is no longer animating these bodies, then we will be dead. And
Mm,
then there's the mystery of what might happen after. But I also think of like these practical ideas of, like I mentioned, that I have this sort of people pleasing mode that I've often been in, where I don't want to upset people. And I'm if I pay too much attention to that, I have these false flags of what will not upset Rachel on her show, and I want her to have a good show, and so I definitely don't want to say anything upsetting. But then what might happen is that if there's something that feels vibrantly true that might actually upset you, and I don't bring that forward, and I'm like playing that gatekeeper role and not upsetting anyone, then potentially I prevent that truth from flowing through me.
mm,
So that's another way that's kind of a nuanced aspect of essence, where, like we talked about IFS and parts work and the reasons for why a part of me doesn't want to upset, the apple cart with anyone. And so there can be a lot to overcome to, and again, IFS is a great model for saying the essence is this self that isn't a part, but it's, that they remind us there's all these C words like creative, courage, uh, compassion. So when I am at my most courageous, when I'm firing on all my creativity, when I am aware of my compassion, I'm much less likely to say, "Hey, in full compassion, here's this something that might upset you, Rachel, but it's important to say." And then I have permission to bring my essence,
Mm,
myself, and be self-led.
mm,
So that's, again, bringing IFS back into the conversation. That's a good way to identify our essence and be more fully in it and lead from that place and interact from that place. But it's so interesting that I can get there by being, here's another C word, curious about
mhm,
my parts and saying, what is that need to not upset everybody? And what if you sometimes allowed people to be upset when it was important, you know?
mhm, mhm,
So those
mhm.
are some thoughts about essence.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really beautiful way of capturing this concept of essence, which can be a little bit hard to talk about. But I feel like you've given us a very practical definition there, and it does link for me too really closely with this idea of parts, because I think those parts are another way I talk about them is survival mechanisms. And if we allow the survival mechanisms to take over, and we only listen to the voices of the survival mechanisms, we aren't able to create. So it's almost like they're these filters that obscure our essence, which is kind of pure light or luminescence. That's how I think about it, which I think is kind of what you're saying there too. Um,
Yeah, I
and then
agree, it
just
can be kinda tricky. Yeah, like,
Yeah, it's so we identify with the voice of the part or the survival mechanism because we that's familiar, it keeps us safe. And yet when we are able to have a bigger perspective and be in curiosity and compassion and clarity and all of those things that IFS offers, then there's more space actually for that part to come forward and to be seen and heard and taken care of. And then we are in our self leadership, I think, in that place. There's another metaphor that kind of came up as you were talking, so I want to share it because you're a musician and a singer songwriter as well. It feels very apt. So as you were talking about essence being a kind of truth, recognizing what needs to come through and not letting the people pleaser part perhaps limit the truth. It seems to me like it's like a tuning fork. When we strike a tuning fork, we kind of hit it and it kind of vibrates at a certain pitch. And that is the notes that we need to find, when we're tuning our instruments. And it seems to me that's another way, perhaps, to think about this, that um, we might think as human beings that we want to kind of hold back because, this other person might not like what we have to say. But actually, if we are brave enough and courageous enough to, be ourselves, it's like the tuning fork, and there's this beautiful sound that vibrates in the field, which is truth, which is love. I think you mentioned the word love. So,
right.
um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, being how do we attune to our essence? And, like, you kinda brought in some ideas about neuroscience and these ideas that are getting reinforced, like, everyone knows that breathing is a way to, kind of regulate your system and calm your system down, and there's lots of patterns of box breathing, and, like, we could say, like, "Let's pause and take 3 deep breaths
Mhm.
right now," and just notice what that does to our systems, even as we're kind of hyper aware of, "Oh, how's the conversation going, and how's the pace, and are we getting all the points in?" So, maybe that would be a good invitation to just, like, let's at least just take a breath and just invite everyone to breathe with us,
Let's
you know?
do that. Let's take a breath. Yeah,
Yeah.
let all this wisdom land, all these points that we've been talking about. So yeah, let's take a breath together. Mm,
Yeah, and I notice just with one breath a little bit of a slowdown,
Mm,
a little bit of a little opportunity to check in.
hmm
And so I think that is part of the attuning
mm,
and and especially when we want to ask ourselves, am I in myself? Am I in that compassionate, caring, creative, curious place? Do I have that kind of energy signature? Or I'm a little afraid of something. Am I afraid of upsetting Rachel? Oh,
mm,
is that what's driving the conversation? And I can say, no, I feel like I'm doing pretty good. That breath kind of didn't feel so foreign to like I didn't need too much regulation, but it felt nice to breathe.
mm, mm. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the invitation to just take a moment to slow down and we often forget it. It's so foundational, the breath, and we so often forget. I do anyway, speaking for myself here, forget to breathe, and in that breath comes the receiving, which is where we started the conversation, talking about receiving as being the kind of key first initial point of creativity. So I feel as if we've come full circle, which is beautiful and not at all planned.
Yes, funny how that happens. Yeah.
Daniel, I could talk to you all day, and I feel like there's a whole part two that we need to do at some point of this conversation. I've really appreciated what you've said about courage and, the ways that you've stepped up, and particularly bringing in this idea of the parts that kind of limit us and hold us back, and how you've worked with those. And then as well, the issue of essence and how that shows up for you, your definition of it. So lots to appreciate about this conversation. I will, and thank you to everybody who's like joined us today and is like listening in, and there'll be people as well watching the recording. So yeah, I hope this wisdom will be spread far and wide. Um, but before we do wrap up, I would love to know from you, like how we can find you, where can we find your work? I will have show notes, so they'll be there in the recap write up. But yeah, where can we find you and your work?
Yeah, so my website is my name, DanielRMandel.com. Um, and my podcast is on all the usual places, Spotify and Apple. It's Creative Engagement. And then my YouTube channel is also Creative Engagement. So, yeah.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to put links in the write up so that people can go back and look for those as well
Oh,
and have
and
the
my
actual links
music
in
as
there.
well. Yeah,
Your
the
music,
music
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
on
Tell us about your
Apple and
music. Where was
Spotify.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll put links in there as well so that people can listen to your stuff. Wonderful, Daniel. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your thoughts and all your wisdom and experience. It's just been a really delightful conversation. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to meeting you in person very soon one day.
It will happen one day. Tell me next time you're back in the UK. And,
Yeah.
yeah, we shall make it so.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here with us, and see you next time. Go
Yes.
well.
Bye bye.
Bye.